Every man is either becoming an asset or becoming a liability. There is no neutral. This is Against the Fade, a podcast for men who refuse to fade midlife. And I'm Jonathan. So this is the sixth episode of this series, the last one. Over the past 5 weeks, we covered a lot of ground. We started with the big picture, the quiet crisis that nobody's naming. We talked about why your friendships disappeared. We talked about the silence, the I'm fine that's killing men. We talked about identity, what it actually means to be a man when the culture can't make up its mind. And last week, we talked about your body, what's happening to it after 40, and what you can do about it. 5 episodes, and every one of them was a diagnosis. This one's different. Today, I'm not telling you what's going wrong. You already know that. You knew that before you even pressed play on this show. You felt it, you just didn't have a name for it. Well, now you do. It's the fade. So the question is no longer, what's happening to me? The question is, what are you going to do about it? That's what today's episode is about. What it actually looks like in practice, not in theory, to be a man who refuses to fade. So I want to do something before we get to the prescription. I want to redraw the map. Because as I've been making this series, as I've been reading the research, writing these episodes, sitting with this material week after week, something clicked for me. And I think it matters. I've been talking about 4 fades. The physical fade, the social fade, the emotional fade, and the identity fade. 4 dimensions of the same crisis. And those are all accurate. They're real, they're all happening, and they all showed up in the research. But when you boil it down to first principles, when you strip away the layers and look at what's actually driving this, it's 3 valleys. And here's what I mean. The physical valley, it's its own thing. Your body's declining, muscle loss, testosterone, metabolism, cardiovascular capacity. We covered all that last week. It's measurable, it's biological, and it's the most reversible of everything we've talked about. You walk into the gym tomorrow, your body starts responding. That valley has a clear path out. And then there's the social valley, and it's its own thing. Your friendships disappeared, not because anyone did anything wrong, but because the structures that built those friendships went away and nothing replaced them. No more team sports, no more late nights in the barracks or the dorm, just work, home, repeat. And men don't build strong bonds through conversation the way women do. We build them shoulder to shoulder. Through shared effort, shared challenge, and shared purpose. Without a structure that creates those conditions, the connections evaporate. And 1 in 6 men in midlife has 0 close friends. And in my mind, that's a crisis. And then there's the third valley. This is the mental valley, and this is where it kind of got interesting for me. I spent an entire episode on the emotional fade, men going silent, the I'm fine that masks everything, the fact that 80% of suicides are men, and then I spent an entire episode on the identity fade. The 2 broken options the culture gives you, and the case for a third path. And I treated those as separate problems, but they're not. The emotional silence and the identity confusion are 2 sides of the same coin. So think about it. A man who can't name what he's feeling can't figure out who he's becoming. A man who doesn't know who he's becoming stops feeling anything worth naming. They feed on each other. The guy who's lost and the guy who's numb, that's the same guy. He's in the same valley, he just doesn't know it. So the real map looks like this. 3 valleys, physical, social, mental. And here's what makes it a crisis instead of just a rough patch. They compound on each other. A man whose body is failing him doesn't have the energy to build a new friendship. A man with no friendships has no one to mirror back who he's becoming. A man with no identity, no emotional language retreats further into isolation, and the isolation accelerates the physical decline. It's a cycle. Each valley makes the other 2 deeper. But this is the part I want to tell you. The reverse is also true. Address one, and the other 2 start to move. Walk into the gym, and your energy comes back. Your confidence shifts. You start showing up differently. Find one honest friendship, and suddenly you have a mirror again. Someone who sees you, someone who tells you the truth. Name what you're actually feeling, even once, even badly, and the fog starts to clear. You start to see a path. The fade is one thing wearing 3 masks, and the man who fights it has to fight on all 3 fronts. He doesn't have to fight them all at once, he just has to start. So if that's the map, 3 valleys, 1 crisis, then the next question is, what does the man who fights it actually look like? What's he aiming at? I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think it comes down to one question. One honest, uncomfortable question that every man in midlife needs to ask himself. Am I an asset or am I a liability? Not to the economy, not on a spreadsheet, but to the people who depend on me, to the men around me, to my own future. Because here's the thing that nobody tells you. There is no neutral. You're not just holding steady. You're either building capacity or you're losing it. You're either becoming a man the people in your life can count on, or you're becoming a man they have to work around. Every day pushes you in one direction or the other. And the fade, the whole point of everything we've been talking about this series, The fade is what happens when a man drifts toward liability without even realizing it. So let me walk you through what an asset looks like, valley by valley. A physical asset is a man who maintains his body, not for vanity, but for capability. He can carry things, he can move without pain, he can keep up with his kids or his grandkids. He has energy at the end of the day, not just at the beginning. He's not training to look like he was at 25. He's training so that at 65 he's not a burden. So that his wife isn't scheduling his doctor's appointments because he fell apart, so that his kids aren't rearranging their lives to manage his decline. A physical asset is a man whose body is a tool for service, not a source of limitation. And last week I gave you the blueprint for that. Resistance training, zone 2 cardio, and high-intensity conditioning. 3 pillars. That's the physical valley handled. Not easy, but clear. And then the social asset is a man who builds connection, not just for himself, but for the men around him. He's the one who makes the call, who sets up the dinner, who texts his buddy who hasn't heard from him in a while. He doesn't wait for someone else to create the space, he creates it. He fights the social valley not because he's lonely, but because he knows every man in his circle is lonely too. And most of them will never say it. A social asset looks around and notices who's missing. He's the guy who says, "Hey, haven't seen you in a while, everything good?" That's not a small thing. For a man who's fading, that phone call might be the only honest interaction he has all month. And then there's the mental asset. And this is the big one. This is where the emotional work and the identity work come together. A mental asset is a man who can name what he's feeling. Not perfectly, not poetically, but honestly. He's done with "I'm fine." He's not performing strength while falling apart on the inside. He's figured out that emotional honesty isn't a weakness. It's a foundation that everything else is built on. You can't figure out who you're becoming if you can't even admit where you are. And a mental asset is a man who knows what he's for. He's answered the identity question, not with a bumper sticker, not with the culture war slogan, but with the framework he's actually lived by. In episode 4, I laid out 4 pillars: protector, provider, builder, mentor. Those aren't job descriptions, they're orientations. It's a man who protects his family, his health, his people, a man who provides not just money, but stability, presence, and energy. A man who builds something that outlasts him. And a man who mentors, who pours what he's learned into the next generation instead of hoarding it. A mental asset has his feet underneath him. He knows what he believes, he knows what he's building, and when the world gets loud and confusing, and it will, he doesn't get knocked off his center because he has one. So that's the picture. A physical asset, a social asset, a mental asset. A man who's becoming more capable, more connected, and more clear as he ages. That's what Against the Fade means. Not fighting time, fighting drift. So you've got the map, 3 valleys. You've got the target. Be an asset, not a liability. Now let's talk about what this actually looks like on a Tuesday. Because frameworks are great, and I love frameworks, but a man who understands the problem and does nothing about it is just a well-informed liability. So here's the prescription. Valley by valley. Nothing complicated, nothing that requires you to quit your job or overhaul your life by Friday, but nothing optional either. So the physical valley. Train your body, 3 to 4 days a week. Resistance training. Squats, hinges, presses, pulls, lunges, carries, full body, progressive overload. I covered all this last week, so I'm not going to reteach it. But I'll say it again. This is not optional. This is the single highest leverage thing you can do for every marker of your health that matters. Cardio, metabolic, hormonal, cognitive, and emotional, all of it. Then add in your moderate intensity or zone 2 cardio once or twice a week, 45 minutes to an hour, put it on a podcast, and move at a pace where you can hold a conversation but wouldn't want to. It's not sexy, but it works. And then once a week, do something hard. 1 high-intensity interval session. Get your heart rate up to a place that's uncomfortable, hold it for a few minutes, recover, and repeat. The whole thing takes about 30 minutes. That 1 session per week is protecting your cardio system in ways that nothing else replicates. So that's it. 3 kinds of training: resistance, steady state, high intensity. That's the physical prescription. Not a 12-week program, not a transformation challenge, a lifestyle. Something you do because you've decided your body is a tool that's going to serve you and the people who need you for the next 30 years. Then there's the social valley. This one's simpler than you think and harder than you want it to be. 1 call a week, 1 real conversation, not a text, not a like on a post, a phone call. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, doesn't matter. Pick up the phone, call someone you haven't talked to in a while, and that's it. 1 meal a month. Sit across from another man and eat food. No agenda, no networking, just 2 guys sharing a meal. You'd be amazed how rare that is for most men our age. And you'd be amazed at what happens when you start doing it consistently. And 1 honest conversation, with anyone. With your wife, your buddy, your brother. 1 conversation where you tell the truth when someone asks how you're doing. Not the highlight reel, the real answer. You don't have to deliver a monologue, just tell the truth. And here's what we need to understand about the social prescription. You're probably waiting for someone else to initiate it. Everyone is. That's why nothing happens. Be the man who makes the call. Be the man who sets up the dinner. Be the man who says, "Hey, I've been thinking about you." You're not being needy, you're being the asset. Every man in your circle is as isolated as you are. Someone has to go first, and let that person be you. Then lastly, the mental valley. Stop saying I'm fine. That's the starting point. I don't care how you get there. Therapy, a men's group, a journal, a conversation with a friend who won't let you off the hook. But the pattern of stuffing everything into a box and performing strength while the foundation cracks, that pattern should end now, or it ends you. Those are the options. Know your pillars. Are you protecting the things that matter? Are you providing, not just financially, but with your presence, your energy, your stability? Are you building something that will outlast your career? Are you mentoring, pouring what you've learned into someone younger who needs it? You don't need all four firing on all cylinders by next month, but you need to know which ones are weak. Name them. That's the first step. And serve something bigger than yourself. Your family, your community, your faith, your future self. It doesn't matter what it is, but a man without something to serve is a man without a reason to fight. And there's a difference between a soldier and a warrior. A soldier fights because he's told to. A warrior fights because he knows what he's protecting. Strength without purpose is just a soldier following orders. The man who knows what he serves, that's a warrior. And warriors don't fade. And here's the great thing about fighting the fade. It compounds. You start training and your energy comes back. Your energy comes back and you start showing up differently. At home, at work, in every room you walk into. You make a phone call and suddenly you've got a friend again. You tell the truth once about your feelings and the pressure valve releases just enough to think straight. You get clear on your pillars and you stop drifting. You stop drifting and your confidence shifts. Your confidence shifts and your wife notices, your kids notice, and you notice. Then 6 months from now, when you take this seriously, not perfectly, not obsessively, just seriously, you won't recognize the trajectory you're on. Not because you became a different person, but because you became the version of yourself that was under there the whole time, the one that was fading. All right, so I want to zoom out for a second because everything I just laid out, the training, the phone calls, the honesty, the service, that's the daily fight. That's the prescription. But underneath all of that is a deeper question. And I think it's a question that actually determines whether a man fades or doesn't. Do you believe your best years are behind you? Most men in midlife, if they're being honest, would probably say yes. Maybe not out loud, but in the way they carry themselves, in the way they talk about the future like it's something to be managed instead of something to build, and in the way they've stopped starting things. And I get it, because the math feels obvious. You're not as fast as you were, you're not as reckless, your career might have plateaued, the body doesn't recover the way it used to. Everything the culture values, youth, speed, raw ambition, potential, you have less of it every year. By that scoreboard, yeah, we're probably losing. And I've been there, and I want to be honest with you. I don't have it all figured out. There was a stretch not long ago when I looked at the road ahead and thought, hey, maybe the good years already happened. I'm a trainer. I made a career out of helping people get stronger. And even I had that moment where the voice in my head said, you're past it. And that voice is convincing, but it's wrong. But I didn't figure that out through positive thinking. I figured that out by reading, by paying attention, and by watching what actually happens to men who refuse to quit. And here's what I found. Arthur Brooks writes about this. He's a Harvard professor who studies the science of happiness and human development. And he makes a distinction that changed the way I think about aging. He talks about two kinds of intelligence. Fluid intelligence, that's your raw processing power, your ability to learn new things fast, to innovate, to work on pure horsepower. That peaks in your 30s and 40s. It declines, and that decline is real. But there's a second kind, a crystallized intelligence. That's your accumulated wisdom, your pattern recognition, your ability to teach and synthesize and lead with depth instead of speed. And that doesn't decline. That increases. It increases into your 50s, your 60s, and your 70s. The things that make a man valuable to his family, his community, his work, judgment, steadiness, perspective, the ability to see around corners, those are getting stronger right now. So you're not losing capacity, you're converting it. Then David Brooks writes about something similar. He talks about the first mountain and the second mountain. The first mountain is the one that everyone climbs, the career, the achievement, the status, the accumulation. And for a lot of men, that mountain is the only one they know. So when it plateaus, when the title stops meaning what it used to, when the ambition runs dry, it feels like the end. But it's not the end, it's the transition. The second mountain is the one you choose. It's not about what you accumulate, it's about what you give. What you build for others and what you commit to. Not because it advances your career, but because it matters. Your family, community, faith, purpose, that outlasts a resume. So if the first summit was youth, speed, potential, raw energy, you climbed it. Great. The second summit is the one that counts, and it builds on everything you've earned. Every failure, every lesson, every scar, every year of experience that a 25-year-old doesn't have and can't fake. The second summit isn't a consolation prize for aging. It's the whole point. That's what I believe, and that's what this show is about. That's why I call it what I call it. So that's the Foundation series. 6 episodes, 6 weeks, one idea from a lot of different angles. You don't have to fade. Your body's not a lost cause, it's a system you can optimize. Your friendships didn't die, the structures that built them did, and you can build new ones. Your silence is not strength, it's a habit you can break. Your identity is not a casualty of the culture, it's something you get to define. And the second half of your life is not a slow decline, it's a second summit. It's a summit that you get to choose, one that you get to build, and one that's worth more than the first because you earned every step of it. That's what I believe, and if you've made it through all 6 of these episodes, I think some part of you believes it too. Now this was the foundation, the map, the diagnosis, and the prescription. But it's not the whole conversation, not even close. There's more things to say about every single one of these things we've touched on in this series. More to dig into, more to challenge, and more to build. So I'll tell you what's coming next. In the mental valley, the identity question, the purpose question, there's something we haven't touched on yet. Something I've been thinking about for a long time. An X factor that I think changes everything about how a man answers the question, what am I here for? It goes deeper than pillars, deeper than frameworks. It's the thing underneath all of it. And that's the next conversation. So if this series meant something to you, even if one episode made you think differently about where you are and where you're headed, do me a favor, share it. Send it to one man who needs to hear it. That's it, one guy, a friend, a brother, a coworker, a dad. You know who he is. You've probably been thinking about him the whole time you've been listening. And if you want to stay connected, subscribe wherever you're listening and join the newsletter. That's where the conversation keeps going between episodes. My name is Jonathan. This is Against the Fade. Don't fade.